Being a sex addict is taking off from work to go home because I want to masturbate. I collected, over the time, I collected tens of thousands of porn pictures of men.
Addiction and homosexuality are one and the same thing.
For a week plus, you masturbate 3-4 times a day. I can break this bondage, the hold that the demon of homosexuality has got on me and my family.
Join me, Elizabeth Marshall, as we take a road trip through the South African psyche, taking you to the edge of society's norms and beyond. It's time for Tales from the Edge.
What if you couldn't control your sexual urges, even as a child? In my research for this chapter, I came across Tiens, whose life has been controlled by his addictive personality. I ventured deep into the dark recesses of the human psyche. Come with me as I take you somewhere over the rainbow.
I can remember as a child also that I used to masturbate every night before I fall asleep.
Sexual addiction, by definition, is these people are unable to control intense sexual urges. So that's the first thing. But they have a need repetitively and compulsively to connect with others through intimate. So the intimate is the sexual, but impersonal ways. And the impersonal ways makes it a problem. Trauma is a very big contributing factor. There are 3 kinds of traumas. 92% of the sexually addicted patients, or we call them CSB, or compulsive sexual behavior, is the same term, it's a more neutral term. CSB, compulsive sexual behavior, is similar to sexual addiction. These patients, 92% of them have been emotionally traumatized in their childhood, somewhere along the line. Either somebody punished them or somebody abused them emotionally. Then 81% of them have been sexually abused, either raped or molested or sodomized or any other type of sexual abuse in childhood.
At the age of 12, it got me into big trouble because I went to a friend of the family's home, and nobody was at home, but the house was the house was open. So I went into the house and found that the uncle was lying in his bed and masturbating. And I thought, wow, adults do this as well. And I went into the room with him, and I undressed, and I played with him, and we played together, and that eventually led in me being raped at the age about 12, 13 years old. It was extremely painful. I kept this to myself because my father was the type that he would punish me for being punished. So I never told him, and I never told anybody about this incident.
Tiens' sexual addiction only worsened throughout his teenage years. So once in his 20s, he thought marriage might be the answer. It wasn't. The marriage was short-lived due to Tiens' infidelities with other men, as well as his voracious sexual appetite. His work at the fire department was also affected by the emotional strain of the breakdown of his marriage.
My eyes will always be wandering around and looking at men, but I wouldn't be able to stay faithful to her as a husband should.
I'm sorry, Murray. I've tried.
Oh, I don't blame you, John. It's just that...
It's not your fault either, of course.
It's just that we don't have...
Exactly.
After we got divorced, I started having and living an openly gay lifestyle.
He began his first long-term gay relationship But ultimately, his self-destructive nature had attracted a man who would in turn self-destruct. Tiens's long-term partner, Andre, passed away due to a drug overdose, and Tiens was the person who discovered the body. Further emotional scarring only pronounced his addiction and led him down the pathway of prostitution.
I was working as a male prostitute in Hillbrow, Braamfontein area. The corner I used to work was there at Volmerans, and I worked there for a long time. You'd be dressed in a seductive way and standing there, and people would drive past and they would see you. Commonly you'd stand under a lamppost. People would see you. Okay, I like that, and then they would do a U-turn and come back, and you'll see them again. And sometimes they would just stop and pull over, and you'd walk up to them and ask them, so how's it going, what you're doing, and what are you doing, and now I'm looking for some fun, and okay, what kind of fun you're looking for, and eventually then, yeah, you'd get into the car and leave with this guy, and you would go to all kinds of places, their houses, street corners, dark alleys, and yep, you will do whatever is required.
They don't enjoy sex, they don't get the gratification from sex. There's shame, there's guilt, and they do not connect to the sexual object or person, and actually they cannot stop this impulse, so they're unable to control this impulse.
Tiens ventured further towards the dark side when he started advertising his services as a masseuse in the newspaper in 2005. The massage was, of course, merely a front for the selling of sex. This seemed to add fuel to Tiens's psychological fire that was already raging through his subconscious.
I used to what I now understand as depression, go through phases, and I just couldn't work. I've lost my job quite a couple of times, either being fired or said, you know what, rather you resign before we fire you.
This condition is progressive, so it gets worse. They repeat the behaviors in different frequency and different variety. So it gets repeatedly worse until they get in trouble or they have to be treated.
I went to Tara because of depression, and I didn't know what it was all about, and I just knew it was depression, and I am currently taking medication for the depression.
Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder is a neurobiological condition that's genetically transmitted, and the great news we've had last week, now in the States, last week they found a gene for ADHD. So that means if there's a gene, there has to be treatment, and unfortunately for many people that are against medication, medication will be the treatment together with all the holistic thing. The attention deficit disorder, 70% of these kids go on to adulthood. In adulthood, if you don't treat them, they arrive in our office here with 5 problems. 10% get in trouble with the law, which includes stealing, drugs, alcohol, includes sex addiction. 15% get into bipolar illness, manic depressive illness. 40% will come here untreated with depression, and 35% will come with anxiety. And lastly, unfortunately, the ones that are not treated, 50 to 60% will end up with substance abuse, drug and alcohol and other substances when they come here. So this is the end result of untreated ADHD.
From Tara Hospital, I didn't have a place to stay, I didn't have anywhere to go to. I qualified for a disability pension because of the depression. I was then transferred to a psychosocial rehab center. At the rehab center, we were all tested with MCMI, something like that test that was done, and there was a long questionnaire that we had to do, and with that I was diagnosed with 10 out of 14 personality disorders. And that was quite frightening. All of a now sudden I've got this problem, I've got that problem. I have a form of bipolar depression. It's called dysthymia. Well, most people have to take medication for the rest of my life.
After his stint in rehab, Tiens came to the realization it was time to change his lifestyle. So he decided to start giving back to the community by helping the disabled.
I was just hands and feet for the quadriplegics. At first I worked with no pay, but it was my choice. And then the first time that I got money, I took that money and I bought myself a bicycle. Working in London, staying in town at the Salvation Army at that stage, I got onto my bicycle and I cycled home. And I was in such a high that I was on a high for nearly, I think 7-8 days. I was just on this massive high that I've never known.
The main treatment in the world is not medication first, it's exercise. What location is to real estate, that's what exercise is to the dopamine and the ADHD or the addiction. So we have to increase our dopamine, which is for focus, and exercise increases 4 things. It increases dopamine, exactly like Ritalin does. Exercise also increases noradrenaline, which is the impulsivity and the brakes of the Ferrari, which prevents them from getting in trouble. Exercise also increases serotonin, which is amazing. Serotonin is a chemical protein neurotransmitters. These are all neurotransmitters that helps anxiety, and depression. So all the 3 things that we need, that we do through medication, can be treated with exercise. The last thing, exercise also increases the endorphins, so it improves your mood. So all the things that we use medication with, especially if parents have an abhorrence to stimulants or other medication, they should exercise.
I heard about the guy, Craig Groom, who was going to have a speech about homosexuality and Christianity. I heard about the course that was run last year called SALT. It's an acronym for Sexual Addicts Learning Trust.
I think when one looks at the issue of sex addiction and homosexuality, I suppose there's many ways of looking at it. My specific view on it, one, sex addiction really is a replacement for authentic relationships. For most of us, when we face crisis in life, we learn how to engage with that through being embraced by those around us. For some of us, facing crisis in life, it's too painful to be known in those places by others, and so we substitute with addictions. One of the most powerful ones being sexual addiction. Sex gives such a powerful physical feeling, which can mask emotional pain.
The truth is this: we are all God's children, and it is not up to our country or our countrymen and our countrywomen to pass laws declaring that some of God's children are better than others.
Homosexuality added to that is a deeper crisis of wanting to know oneself, wanting to discover identity, trying to give a short answer to a very long question, but in a sense is a much larger sexual addiction. The depth of one's unworthiness in one's masculinity, particularly obviously for men, in one's gender identity, is so deep that gets projected onto trying to substitute it through sex.
I think it's very, very important not to confuse sexuality and sexual addiction as such. Especially not to confuse sexual addiction with homosexuality. Being homosexual doesn't necessarily make a person sexually addicted. The question of being heterosexual or homosexual doesn't make one good or bad as such. Sexuality in a certain sense is a neutral given. The question is, what do you do with your sexuality? The important thing is to to learn to deal in a positive way with your sexuality, to live with your sexuality in a responsible, non-destructive way.
With Living Waters and Salt, they say, come as broken as you are. You don't have to be, you first have to do this and first have to do that before you can come to Living Waters. Come as broken as you are, and we will teach you and help you. He asked me about my homosexuality and do I believe that I can be healed from homosexuality. I said, you know what, I don't think so, because I've got a theory that in our family homosexuality is hereditary. So I believe that I was born that way. Then I spoke to this band and they said, yes, no, you know, but I can break this bondage with homosexuality. The hold that the demon of homosexuality has got on me and my family. And I prayed and I physically showed as if I'm cutting this bondage of homosexuality with a sword, and I broke the bondage. He felt that there was something happening to me, and I just sat there and I couldn't get any air. So he asked me what's wrong. I showed him I can't get air. And then he said, no, it's great. And then he prayed again and he said, I demand the demon of homosexuality to leave Tiens's body now. And then I started coughing. And I coughed and I coughed and I coughed. And one of the guys in the group said it looked like I was going to vomit. That's how bad I was coughing. And then I started developing wind. And eventually I had to go to the toilet, and my stomach went 4 times in about 3 hours. And they said, yeah, that is one of the ways that the demon will leave your body. While he was praying, I got this funny tingling sensation on my left hand. And then Nick explained to me that the demons enter your body and leaves your body through all the orifices, including the pores of your skin. And then the group came and they prayed over me, and they gave me the armor of Christianity. And they put on a helmet for me and a breastplate and then the belt, and then they all grouped around me with their shields, symbolically as in Braveheart.
I think specifically sexuality, seeing a person's sexuality and person's sexual orientation as a sign of demon possession, I think is very irresponsible. Masturbation as such, I don't see the demonic side of it. I think when it's a part and parcel of a problem of sexual addiction, that's something totally different.
If you're wanting to know whether I believe homosexuality is a valid identity or not, I would say no.
It was the decision of the federal courts to legalize interracial marriage. It was the decision of a president to abolish slavery. It was the decision of another president to abolish segregation in the armed forces. If it had been left to a majority vote, none of this would have happened.
In my own experience and the experience that I've had with working with many men in this, is that homosexuality isn't an identity as much as a need to try to discover worthiness, right, apart from knowing that I'm already worthy in my identity. It's a need to compensate for an unworthy identity, right? It's a way of compensating. And so it's not two separate issues. Addiction and homosexuality are one and the same thing.
You hear about other people's prejudice, but you never feel guilty until you realize it's you. You're the one who's prejudiced.
It's not poof and everything is gone. I don't look at a man, I don't want to masturbate. It's not like that. In Living Waters, I've got 2 accountability partners. And when I get the urge, instead of falling for it, I'd phone one of them.
I'd really take the view that demonic activity in our lives is, if it's there, is there because we've opened the door through our own activities. And so removing that doesn't mean that the activities stop. I still have to find control in my activities, right?
I've learned to see where the triggers are, things that trigger me for wanting to masturbate, things that trigger me for wanting to have homosexual sex. I, for instance, cannot watch WWE Raw, that wrestling, because that triggers me. I realized I had to get rid of my porn. I got all my books together and I put them on the cabinet there, and they just lied there. And then just one Monday morning, I got up and I saw this pack of books lying here. I walked out, grabbed this pack of books and I threw them in the dustbin. And then I had to go through my computer and look for, well, they were all on the same, under one file. It took me a while, but I eventually could take this one file just and delete it.
Through this material, today's youth can be stimulated to sexual activity for which he has no legitimate outlet. He is even enticed to enter the world of homosexuals, lesbians, sadists, masochists, and other sex deviants.
Doing what I've been doing, I've always had this guilt of what I've done, what I am doing. If I'm not masturbating, it's not no excuse to masturbate. But if it's not going to, if I don't masturbate, I am going to have.
I had a wet dream last night.
The dream that I've had was definitely gay, and for some other reason with straight guys that I used to work with.
My impression in listening to Tians is that even after the demon is supposed to have been exorcised, he still has the urges, homosexual urges. He still has the urge to masturbate, which is in a certain sense in contradiction with the fact that the demon is supposed to be exorcised.
He's gotten to a place in his own life where he's decided that he wants to separate from that lifestyle. Has been entirely his choice. He's never been forced to that. And so for me, in watching him walk this out in his life with us next to him, has been a witness of how much God's love really does change someone.
Listening to Tian's story, I think there are deep issues of child abuse, long involvement in prostitution, sexual addiction, things that need to be treated. But I think those things should be seen apart from whether he's homosexual or not. If Tians is a homosexual person, the best thing for him would be to find a positive way of living out his sexuality and his sexual orientation. Say, for example, as you said, in a relationship based on mutual trust, based on love, mutual fulfillment.
For any form of addiction, speak to God about it.
Oh God, deliver us from evil.